You've entered Bookstorm. Your favorite authors are here to dive down deep into their best-selling books. Stay tuned to brave the storm.
Well, welcome back to Bookstorm Podcast. I'm Kristen Civiletto, your co-host, and with me is Julia Rose. We're so happy you're here. You're tuning in from 102 countries and territories now. We just looked it up this morning. All 50 states and more than 2,100 cities. And we know why. It is because we are bringing you the very best authors. And today is no exception. We are just thrilled. New York Times bestselling author Rick Mofina is here. Welcome, Rick.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the invitation. Happy to get away from the keyboard.
Well, we're happy that you're taking that time, but get back to writing when we're done. We're going to talk about this fantastic new book that you have, If Two Are Dead. And I want to show this cover because it's actually really beautiful. And just like your other novels, this one is a page turner, a thriller. We loved it, and I want to tell our listeners about it in just a second. I think Julia's got a couple things she wanted to say. But I wanted to tell our listeners a little bit about your background. You are a former journalist, and you've interviewed people, murderers on death row, which I thought was really appropriate for this book. And you have flown all over the world for the stories that you have been writing over the years. And we love that perspective. We can see where your experience with crime, not as a criminal, but as a journalist covering it, certainly comes into play. And also, you've written 30 crime fiction thrillers. Is that right? Is this number 30?
Actually, I think it's number 33.
33. Oh my goodness.
I just submitted number 34 to my publisher for next year, and I'm starting number 35. So 33 are done.
That is pretty cool. We saw that your books have been published in nearly 30 countries, including an illegal translation produced in Iran.
Yeah, we need the background on that.
Yeah, it sounds like a plot.
Well, I had nothing to do with that. I just happened to discover it. Authors do this from time to time. You search a library at random to see if they have your books, and sometimes you go outside the country. And it turned out a library in Australia had an edition in Farsi of one of my earlier books. And I went, we never sold the rights to that. And I tracked down what I could, and it turned out it was a bootleg edition. I'm not the only author. This happens to authors around the world. And I contacted an international copyright lawyer, and in the end, they said, it would cost you a lot of money to fight this, and you probably wouldn't win. So think of it as an honor. And
It also say that sounds flattering.
It also sounds like the plot of a book unfolding in there somewhere.
Well, I won't go into it, but I was still reporting at the time. And there was a connection to a US company. There was international embargoes and treaties that were violated. And I had a friend at the LA Times and a friend at the Wall Street Journal. I thought, well, crime reporter turned crime writer tracks down an illegal, and they were interested, but we just didn't pursue it. So we just let it go. It was the publisher said, no, this was way back. So
yeah. All right. We'll stick with flattery.
Yeah.
And I want to tell our listeners too, you're a 2-time winner of Canada's Arthur Ellis Award and the Barry Award, a 4-time Thriller Award finalist, and a 2-time Shamus Award finalist. Library Journal calls you one of the best thriller writers in the business. We love that, and we agree.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's great to hear. Thank you. But there's
Now,
so many great authors out there. So it's just nice to be part of the community, and people like yourselves and readers to make it all more fun.
So I wanted to give our listeners a little background to this story, and I won't give away any spoilers. And if there's anything that you want to add to the summary after, please do.
Sure.
So when you open this book, you are met with Luke Conway, and he is driving alone at night in a wild rainstorm, and he strikes something or someone. And he and his wife, Carrie, recently moved to Clear River, Texas, to help take care of her ailing father. And after a tragedy at Luke's previous job, this move is their last chance at a new life. Now, standing in the downpour on this Texas road, Luke, an off-duty cop, has a decision to make, and he has to make it fast. No one else is around, no witnesses, and he can't find a body. Wanting to believe he's being paranoid and that he's just seeing things, Luke panics and leaves, deciding not to report the incident, but rather to secretly investigate it. He can't put more stress on his wife, Carrie, who's already haunted by an unsolved attack and murder of 2 teenage girls that happened years ago in Clear River, a horrific crime where she was the sole survivor. The killer has never been found, but Carrie and Luke's anguished search for answers will slowly reveal the horrific truth. Did that about cover it?
Yeah, good. I'd like to read that. Thank you. Yeah, that sounds like covers it pretty good. Yes.
So the serial killer thing, I feel like it's a theme. It's something that is a trend. People get really into these things because we have this morbid fascination. And I wonder, and I think a lot of other people do as well, what happens to these people in their mind that these dark thoughts are able to consume them? What actually ends up pushing them over the edge? And I know you've done a ton of research on this for all of your books and you've interviewed them. So we would really love your insight into that.
Well, I can only offer my 2 cents worth of observations from my time as a journalist, reporting on real crimes and interviewing the experts and researching all that I could when you're reporting on them. I think we sometimes call them urban vampires, modern day vampires who may be bereft of a soul, and we're just fascinated by the split between good and evil. I mean, they carry on. They live next door. They just about every urban center has one or two, and the ones that are operating you just don't know about till they're caught. But I think our fascination really it just goes back to it's in our own DNA, the split between good and evil. I recall one of my trips to Manhattan at, I think, and people can correct me on this, I think it's St. John's Cathedral. They have the statue in the garden of the Michael the Archangel fighting Lucifer. I mean, it's just a beautiful, epic statue of the battle of good and evil and the whole idea of better to rule in hell than serve in heaven. Whereas they have this sort of, I don't know, in my opinion, they have this sort of desire to satisfy a need and appear to have power over people. I got a sense of that from some of the people I interviewed, and they're just not built like the rest of us, but yet we're fascinated. I think it's the same way why people slow down. It's awful, but people slow down to look at car accidents. People gawk at tragedies. Some people jump in to help, but I mean, it's just part of our whole human makeup that we like to know. And for those who do study them, and we all know about the research that was done way back to profile them, to understand them, in order to identify and maybe prevent them, but they'll always exist. They always have, and they make their way into modern day entertainment at all levels. I mean, there's the true crime shows that actually document, or documentaries that study them, and then various Hollywood takes, and I use that term widely, Hollywood, for all entertainment, which I'm part of it as well. But yeah, I think it's always a fascination to the point it becomes a subgenre, it becomes cliche, but it matters. It depends how it's told. And we all like that old gather around the campfire and hear a story that may be grounded in truth, which just adds a bit of a chill to it. So yeah, I've been fascinated by it myself. I don't use it in every book, but you can allude to it, and there's ways to layer it and bring it into play, as I did in this one, but I don't want to give anything away. It was not the dominating factor, as you guys know, but it sort of creeps up on you.
No, it does. We were talking about this a little bit before you got on, just how we have had exposure to, serial killers or, other types of violent criminals in our neighborhoods and that we went to school with and things like that. And I this might be in one of our questions, so I'm not sure if I want to get ahead of myself, but just that idea of that this can go on behind the scenes. And like you said earlier, that you just don't know until they're caught. And, it's just crazy. So,
Yeah, I agree. Well, I want to ask you about something else that I thought was kind of an interesting theme running through your story. Luke is a police officer, And he makes a split-second decision to not report an incident that he may or may not have been involved in. But he starts to second guess himself. He becomes distracted. He starts to have some symptoms of PTSD, even from a prior incident that he had when he lived in LA. And I wanted to ask you about that because, we don't talk often enough about those lingering impacts of trauma. But that's especially the case when we're dealing with law enforcement who are observing traumatic events and even being a part of them throughout their career. And I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Well, that's a good question, actually. Again, going back to my crime reporting days, I had interviewed officers who did face traumatic situations. And that always stuck with me, that taking a life, whether justified or not, does not sit well, with normal people, even if it's part of their job. So I thought I would bring that into play in this story. So you have Luke, who has his past trauma that had affected his performance, affected his life. And when the story opens, it's almost like, oh, here we go again. So as you learn more about him and his past, then you understand how his reaction, you can judge. Everybody can play armchair quarterback after the moment. Anyone can do something better after the moment in the luxury of being calm and in a different environment. But when you're in that moment and everything is moving in your head at the speed of light of what could be involved here, you might make a correct decision and you might make the wrong decision. But that all ties in with the trauma he experienced before, which we won't detail here, but it becomes evident in the story. So yeah, I thought that was an important part. I thought that, to me, that made Luke more of a well-rounded, realistic character. So they're bookended. Luke and his wife, they're both facing trauma of two different types, and they're both trying to help each other. And they're thrown into these impossible circumstances, which just, I thought, as it went on, as I worked on this one and discussed it with my agent, my editor, I thought it could all fall apart as a story, or it could work out. And I just got taken up in the story and the setting because I had been to Texas. I make no bones about the fact I'm not an expert on Texas. I had been there. I had been to East Texas and traveled around. So I had memories of it. And the prison is a whole other thing. But I wanted to bring that into play about his PTSD, as it were.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because you focused on some of the physical manifestations, that distractibility, that little shakiness. There were times he just wasn't thinking clearly. And as you pointed out, his wife was also dealing with a trauma of her own, but still had to take care of her child and run the household and organize a move and care for her father. So how the two of them navigated that trauma response, I thought was a really interesting part of your story.
Well, I wanted to make them, I thought that made it as more realistic, more down to earth. They're dealing with day situations, as we all are. I mean, everyone in the world has got their own challenges. So I thought that would work out nicely and fit with the story. And I grew to like them all. I liked all the characters in the book.
Yeah, very much.
I thought it was interesting. In the beginning, Luke became very relatable when he almost chose not to report it. Not saying I would, but he checked, he did due diligence, and he went out and he made sure that, there was nothing around, and he played with that like moral choice. And that's something that I think that people would say, well, what would I do in that situation? There wasn't a victim. Would I have called? Do I need to have a police background to, want to investigate something? And that struck me.
Well, thank you. I didn't know how that would really play out. That was over dramatized, I have to admit. I don't know procedurally. I mean, I knew that, if you leave the scene of a crime, that he did have, on one level, it's very simple to call it in, have everyone investigate, but then it does set all kinds of things in motion. And if it turned out this way or it turned out that way, that would have an impact on him. So I wanted to play around with that. And also I thought it was the telltale heart theme in the corner of all of this, with the, he's playing, did I hit something? Did I hit someone? Am I in the clear? Am I not in the clear? His whole conscience was playing on him nonstop. And then it comes into play as the story evolves and more things become known, and anyway, things just take right off. So.
Rick, I want to go
Oh,
back to something that Julia had asked you, or she alluded to earlier, and that is this idea, and this nagged at me the whole book. Can we ever truly know someone? And I wanted to put that out to you because, again, we're not giving away any spoilers, but do you
No,
think we could truly know the people in our lives, in our orbit?
no, you can't. I mean, that's just human nature. I can remember I was a kid and my mom used to read the religiously Ann Landers' Dear Abby columns. And she had said that from time to time when people would write, you never really know a person. And I think it's true. I mean, there's always levels of private selves that people don't reveal. Sometimes superficial and sometimes it's much darker. But no, and that's just great for fiction writers. It's I don't think you can ever. I mean, how boring that would be if we knew everything about everybody. Everyone has to have a little bit of mystery about them.
I feel like that's evident in the fact that I still get surprised sometimes when my husband does something or has a certain preference, and I'm like, I didn't know that, and it's something so simple, but somebody you spend all your time with and you still are always learning about them. And yeah, I could see that.
Well, that again, if you really want to amp that up, as we know in real life, we were talking about this earlier. When it's some big epic secret that is going to shake the world, well, then you're at a whole other level. Say, I never knew that about that person, and these things happen, and that's what makes for great stories. I mean, I'm talking certainly tragic circumstances in the real world, but if you're a creative writer, it gives you something to think about. How would you portray that?
Nice. All right. Well, we discussed morals, we discussed ethics, we discussed, making decisions and choices. And I think my last question for you is about conscience and the desire that people have to die with a clear conscience. So it's a truism about human beings that even so that the statements of a dying person can be admitted into court, right? So people just want to get something off their chest. They want to tell the truth. And there's no consequence necessarily if they're already dying, right? So that was a theme throughout your story. And why is that important in the story, but also just for people?
Well, I think it certainly came into play for this story that somebody wanted to basically clear things and get things settled, or keep something buried until the end. I don't know. I mean, I guess we really don't know till we're there ourselves in terms of, legally they're called a dying declaration, as we know in crime fiction and true crime stuff, that a statement given by someone who believes they're going to die, and the investigators who are taking the statement, it's evident they're going to die. So it does hold up in court, as you point out. But I think it's also the spiritual philosophical aspects to it that we think that you want to, if you think we're departing this realm, that we do want to clear our conscience and get things straight. I think that's also human nature. Under dire circumstances, people tell the truth, but also we know to flip that around, people will tell people what they want to know if they're being tortured and thinking they're facing death, and they might just say, well, this isn't true, but I'm going to tell you because you think it's true. That's a whole other thing. But there are various elements to people giving statements when they're near death, and it's very good for when you're dramatizing a story. Again, coming back to the whole telltale heart aspect as well, that comes into play. But yeah, in this book, it was a double-edged sword, as it were, to tell the truth. And there are a couple of I'm thinking back to the story. There are a couple of aspects and scenes where this comes into play as well. So yeah, I think we can get philosophical about it, but I think it's human nature.
Well, on the philosophy side of things, Kristen, earlier when we were discussing the book, you brought up such an interesting question. I had it
Yes,
written down.
about the difference between people dying with a lie versus dying for a lie. And I kept thinking about that in the story because we had, people potentially who could die knowing, that something maybe wasn't true. But that's very different than dying for a lie, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And I think I know where you're going in this. We don't want to give things away, but there was the expectation that if I do this, some good will come of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was sort of a sacrifice of some sort, but it was entwined with another lie, and so yeah, I think there is a difference, of course, as you point out. I totally agree. So again, it's something that becomes instrumental in this story, and something you can play around with. It's just basically seasoning the story of where do you go with these things.
Yeah.
So brought that into play here. I thought, well, you can go many ways, and it makes for a nice tapestry of a tale there.
Yeah. And I kept thinking too about how far we're willing to go for the people we love. And there were many characters who I think had to wrestle with that question in the story.
I think
Again,
so.
you can't
I
give
agree.
anything away, but
We're treading the line.
We don't want to give anything away. We just want to make it more tantalizing for someone
there
to
you go.
read it. But I think too, in real life, this all comes back. I mean, in real life, you just never know till you're actually tested, and you don't want to be tested, because I've heard this from other people who've been through terrific experiences, horrific experiences. You don't want to be tested because it reveals something to yourself, and whether they're judged or not, they judge themselves after. And if you're not tested, then you don't have to open that door to find out what you would really do rightly or wrongly, surprise yourself or surprise others, and that goes around to all of us. I think we're all just hanging on, doing the best we can, and take things as they come and see what happens next.
Yeah, excellent. I know Julia had a burning question she wanted to ask.
Well, that was a good segue, because I was going to ask you about what you have going on next. And I know that earlier you mentioned that you are already books beyond us. You've turned one in and you're writing one now, and you're busy. So in those, are you able to give us a sneak peek onto maybe some of the themes or a crime that you've written about that you have coming up?
Well, I never really like to discuss what I'm working on until I follow that. I don't like to discuss what I have in progress. The one that I just submitted is a standalone thriller, contemporary, and it moves very, very fast. It's totally different from the one you just read. And we'll leave it at that on that one. And the one I'm working on now, I could tell you, I plan for it to be a shorter novel and dark.
Oh, interesting.
Dark.
That's it. That's about as far as I could. Noirish, you might say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we loved this one, first of all, of To Our Dead. So we're going to show this cover again, but we do hope you come back and talk about your future books. We loved having you on the show. And, we read every word of these books. We love to talk about them, and we can tell that you do as well. So thank you so much, Rick, for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. You guys are terrific. Thank you very much. This was fun. Thank you.
This was a lot of fun. Even talking about serial killers.
Yeah.
I know that we do have a website for you at www.rickmofina.com. And it's beautiful. Even the writing in your bio and, on your website, I was like, all right, this was written by, somebody with that background. Are you on social media that we can share with our listeners?
Oh yeah. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter, X, and Blue Sky. And if people want to contact me, I'm talking as an old guy now. Best is just to email me off of my website. I get messages on Instagram and Facebook, and sometimes they sit there for 10 months and then pop up the next day. And so I'm all over the place. So
I would say more savvy than us. I am not on Blue Sky. I don't even know what that is.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you again, Rick. We love having you, and we can't wait to talk to you again in the future.
Oh, thank you guys. This was just a blast. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Well, that was interesting. I actually kind of forget how much I like, crime fiction and serial killers and all that stuff until I sit down and read or watch, and then I'm just drawn back in.
I know, because you always think about your own conduct and you measure it up. What would I do in that situation? And I always wonder, and this is really a great question that you had asked, what pushes people over that edge? Because people have dark thoughts. There's, everybody has dark thoughts at some point. But what causes some people to go in this direction and others to go straight to the pit of hell? I don't know.
Right.
So that's a pretty interesting question that he explores here.
And I
So
think earlier too, we might not have discussed this necessarily, either we were writing, but you brought up that watching these and paying attention to these choices that people are making sometimes help us distinguish right and wrong in our own lives, and
yeah,
not just right or wrong in terms of, killing somebody, obviously, but those like moral things and those choices and even the choices that characters are making. And like you said, we kind of level up, next to those. Sorry, keep
yeah, I agree. Better to do it in fiction in that context,
no.
right? Well, I wanted to tell our listeners about some of our other fantastic authors that we have coming up. We have Christina McMorris coming back for The Girls of Good Fortune, Ryan Steck with Monarch, Brad Taylor, Into the Gray Zone, Maggie Stiefvater, The Listeners, Chanel Cleaton, The Lost Story of Eva Fuentes, and I think we have a whole list. Jesse Rosen, All the Signs, Tess Gerritsen, The Summer Guests. Please join us. You can find us, of course, at our website at bookstormpodcast.com. You can also find us on Instagram, on X. We're all over YouTube. And we continue to grow every week because you are tuning in and sharing our socials, and we're so grateful. And we know why. It's because we are bringing you the best authors, and they are here on the show. So join us next week.